Have you ever had like a genuinely brilliant thought?
Oh, all the time.
Right, like something incredibly insightful or maybe just perfectly hilarious, but then you keep it entirely to yourself.
Got a sheer paralyzing fear.
Yes, you just bite your tongue, you nod, you smile. And then, like 3 hours later, you're standing in the shower delivering this flawless, passionate, incredibly articulate speech about it to a shampoo bottle.
Well, the shower really is the ultimate judgment-free zone.
It is.
I mean, the acoustics make you sound commanding, and the soap never suddenly interrupts you to point out a flaw in your logic or, mock your pronunciation. It's a completely controlled environment where your ego is totally safe.
Yeah, but then we step out of the shower, right? We get dressed, we enter the real world, and we freeze again.
Exactly.
And that disconnect between who we are in private and who we allow ourselves to be in public, that's actually the core focus of today's deep dive. We are exploring a fascinating piece of material today.
It really is.
On the surface, it's a transcript from an English language learning show, which
Sounds a bit niche, right?
Yeah. It was designed to help non-native speakers build confidence and expand their vocabulary. But when you look past the surface-level grammar lessons, it is secretly an absolute masterclass in behavioral psychology.
Totally.
It lays out this profound, actionable framework for overcoming the universal fear of other people's judgment.
Yeah, and what's wild is the creators are speaking directly to language learners who are terrified of conjugating a verb incorrectly or using the wrong idiom. But the psychological barriers they map out, they apply to absolutely anyone who feels paralyzed by the perceived gaze of others.
Right. Anyone at all.
Whether you are speaking a second language or pitching a high-stakes idea in a corporate boardroom or just trying to, exist authentically at a neighborhood dinner party.
The underlying neurobiology of that fear is identical.
Exactly. It's exactly the same.
Because the issue at play isn't actually about having the right vocabulary at all, is it?
No, not really.
It is about vulnerability. It's about the terror of being truly seen. So our mission for this deep dive is to extract these actionable frameworks and the vivid language used in this material to help you, the listener, stop performing for this invisible, highly critical audience in your head.
And start living without constantly editing yourself.
Yes. So to do that effectively, we have to trace this fear back to its origin. Like we have to understand how this intense self-monitoring actually takes root in our cognitive architecture in the first place.
All right, because you don't just wake up one random Tuesday suddenly terrified of the world's judgment.
No, you definitely don't. Okay, so let's unpack this. The material points out that this fear begins with tiny, almost microscopic moments, usually much earlier in life.
Yeah, childhood, middle school.
Right, or at a family gathering, it's a passing joke someone makes about your outfit, or a teacher sighing heavily when you ask a question. And to the person doing the criticizing, it is one fleeting second of their day. They probably forget it before lunch.
Oh, absolutely.
But for the person on the receiving end, the brain logs it as a major threat. And there are two very specific, visceral vocabulary words used in the source here to describe what happens to those microtraumas.
Right, the first word is that these comments linger.
Linger, yeah.
And the concept of lingering is vital here because it taps into a well-documented psychological phenomenon known as the negativity bias.
Which is fascinating.
It is. From an evolutionary standpoint, our brains are basically wired like Velcro for negative experiences and like Teflon for positive ones.
Velcro and Teflon, I love that.
Right, because remembering a compliment didn't keep our ancestors alive, but remembering which berries made them sick or which social behaviors got them ostracized from the tribe that absolutely did.
Survival of the fittest.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when a comment lingers, it's staying in your mental environment far longer than it should. Sort of like a foul odor trapped in a small room.
Yeah.
Because your brain is desperately trying to keep that threat top of mind to protect you from future harm.
Which naturally leads to the second word introduced in the text, which is that the fear begins to seep.
Seep, right.
And the idea of fear seeping into other areas of your life makes me think of, well, imagine a slow, hidden water leak in a house.
Okay, yeah.
Imagine a pipe dripping slightly behind the drywall in your living room. You don't notice it at first. The paint still looks completely fine.
You'd have no idea.
Exactly. But day by day, drop by drop, that water is moving through the wood. It's traveling along the joists, saturating the plaster. You ignore it because it's out of sight.
Right.
But suddenly, like years later, you go to place a heavy piece of furniture down and the floorboards crack. The entire structural foundation of the house has been compromised by this slow, silent migration of water.
Man, that analogy perfectly illustrates the mechanism of generalized anxiety.
Doesn't it?
Because the fear might start in one very specific context, say a classroom, where your peers laughed at you for reading aloud. But because it seeps, the brain starts pattern matching.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Pattern matching.
Yeah, it decides that not just the classroom, but any group setting is dangerous. It seeps into your friendships. Then it seeps into your workplace behavior.
It's everywhere.
Suddenly, it's dictating how you interact on social media or whether you even strike up a conversation at a cafe. Your entire psychological foundation becomes thoroughly saturated with this baseline expectation of being judged.
So I want to bridge the gap here between carrying that hidden, seeped-in foundation of fear and having a full-blown internal crisis when you are literally just trying to order a coffee.
Right.
Like, what is actually happening in our bodies when that old, generalized fear gets triggered by something completely mundane?
Well, the material breaks this down into a sequence of physiological reactions. When you enter a situation where judgment is even a remote possibility, your autonomic nervous system shifts into high alert. You become intensely anxious.
Heart pounding, sweating.
Yes. Your amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, effectively hijacks your rational thought. Your chest tightens, your breathing becomes shallow, and cortisol just floods your system.
That's so intense.
It is. You are experiencing the exact same fight-or-flight biological response as if a predator were chasing you, even though the threat is just a barista waiting for your latte order.
And as a result, your brain starts putting on what the text calls a funny little show.
Oh, yeah.
You completely freak out internally. You start simulating every possible negative outcome in a matter of seconds. And the ultimate physical reaction to all of this inner drama is to shrink back.
Shrink back.
Yeah, and you see this physical manifestation all the time. Like a boss asks, hey, does anyone have any thoughts on this new strategy? And you could almost watch the room physically react.
Right, people pull their shoulders inward.
Exactly. They suddenly find their notebooks incredibly fascinating. They lower their chins. They are trying to minimize their physical footprint.
Because they are subconsciously trying to find safety in invisibility.
Yeah.
If the brain has been trained through that slow seeping leak of past negative experiences that attention equals danger, the logical survival mechanism is camouflage. You shrink back to avoid the predator's gaze.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because that structural rot, that need to constantly camouflage ourselves, it changes how we interact with the world on a fundamental level. We stop being our authentic selves and we become actors.
We do.
We start performing to survive.
And that performance is driven almost entirely by a cognitive distortion referred to here as the spotlight illusion.
The spotlight illusion,
Yeah.
which is the persistent belief that there is a harsh, blinding, theatrical light pointing directly at us at all times.
Always on?
Always on, perfectly illuminating our every flaw, stutter, and awkward movement for this captivated audience. You stumble slightly on the sidewalk and you just assume the people in the cars driving by are intensely judging your lack of coordination.
Right, and the evolutionary psychology behind this is fascinating.
How so?
Well, because our ancestors survived in tight-knit tribes where social cohesion was literally a matter of life and death, we are hyper-tuned to our social standing.
That makes sense.
But the material provides a very sobering reality check. The truth is, people are entirely consumed by the maintenance of their own lives.
Yeah.
They are obsessing over their own spotlights. They are agonizing over an email they sent, wondering if they wore the right shoes, or trying to decipher a vague text message they just received.
So you aren't the main character in their cinematic universe. You are, at best, a background extra walking out of focus behind them for 2 seconds.
Exactly. It is wonderfully liberating when you genuinely internalize how little processing power other people are dedicating to your existence.
It is. But even though the spotlight is an illusion, the cost of believing in it is just staggering.
It really is.
To avoid this imaginary judgment, we hold back. We swallow our insights. And instead of being authentic, which the material defines simply as being real and true to your nature rather than playing a fabricated character, we adopt these heavily curated roles.
Right, the masks we wear.
Yeah, we become the uncomplicated friend, or the hyper-competent employee, or the funny guy who never takes anything seriously. We sacrifice our actual personality so we can effectively walk on eggshells around everyone else.
And the phrase walking on eggshells is a brilliant way to describe the intense cognitive load of self-monitoring.
It sounds exhausting.
It is. When you are walking on eggshells, every single step requires calculated precision. You are mapping out what you want to say, filtering it through how person A might interpret it, adjusting it for person B's sensitivities, and frantically suppressing anything that might rock the boat.
Oh, man, yeah.
You are burning an immense amount of working memory, just maintaining the facade, leaving you drained and basically incapable of actual meaningful connection.
There is a quote from the text about this exact dynamic that hit me incredibly hard. It says, "When you walk on eggshells for everyone else, you step on your own heart."
Wow, that beautifully captures the self-betrayal inherent in this behavior.
Doesn't it?
You are pouring all of your psychological resources into managing other people's theoretical perceptions of you, and in doing so, you completely abandon your own needs and your own voice.
And what's deeply tragic is that we endure all of this cognitive exhaustion and self-betrayal to protect ourselves from criticism. But this material offers a paradigm-shifting perspective on what criticism actually represents in the real world.
What's fascinating here is how it completely reframes the nature of external judgment. Because most of us instinctively view criticism as a perfectly accurate mirror.
Right.
If someone tells us our idea is stupid or our accent is too thick, we assume they have identified an objective, undeniable flaw in us. But the reality is that criticism is almost always a projection.
A projection.
It functions much more like a window into the critic's own internal landscape than a mirror of yours.
Okay, so if a colleague sharply criticizes you for proposing a risky, out-of-the-box solution in a meeting, it rarely means your idea is inherently bad. It's highly probable that they are deeply insecure about their own lack of creativity, or maybe terrified of taking risks themselves. They're throwing their own unexamined discomfort onto you because your bravery makes them feel inadequate.
Precisely. They're externalizing their own inner conflict. And because that criticism is fundamentally about them, not you, the material introduces a physical tactic to process these moments.
Oh, right.
Since you can't just delete a hurtful comment from your auditory memory, you have to learn to brush off the comment.
And I mean this quite literally, like physically taking your hand and dusting off your shoulder.
Yes, employing embodied cognition. When you physically enact the brushing off motion, you are interrupting the rumination loop in your brain.
That is so cool.
You are taking an abstract, lingering thought, the insult, and giving it a physical boundary. You acknowledge it landed on you, but by physically brushing your shoulder, you are signaling to your nervous system, this dust does not belong to me. This is their projection. I am choosing not to carry it.
So if we understand that performing for others means stepping on our own hearts, and if we have tools to brush off the projected insecurities of critics, why do we stay stuck? Why is it so incredibly hard to stop walking on the eggshells?
That's the million-dollar question.
The text argues that we fall victim to a very comforting, very insidious lie, which is the trap of perfectionism.
Ah, yes. The perfection trap is the ultimate stalling tactic.
Mm-hmm.
It is that internal voice that says, I am not hiding forever. I will finally speak up in the meeting when my proposal is absolutely bulletproof.
Right, or I will start recording my music when I have perfect pitch.
Exactly. It sounds responsible, it masquerades as high standards, but it is entirely a defense mechanism designed to keep you indefinitely waiting for a state of flawlessness that just does not exist.
And the material uses a fantastic analogy here. It points out that waiting for perfection before you engage with the world is exactly like saying, I will finally learn to swim just as soon as I already know how to swim perfectly.
Which is completely absurd, but it exposes the logical fallacy perfectly. You cannot learn the mechanics of swimming by standing completely dry on the pool deck reading a textbook about fluid dynamics.
Right.
The learning only happens through contact with the medium. You have to get into the water, your strokes will be messy, you will splash awkwardly, and you are inevitably going to swallow some water. The friction of doing it poorly is the exact mechanism that teaches you how to do it well.
Wait, but getting into the water and looking foolish is the exact thing people are terrified of.
Of course.
Like if someone is dealing with a severe fear of judgment, telling them to just jump in and look messy isn't helpful. It's paralyzing. If I jump in and I'm terrified, I'm not learning to swim, my amygdala is just screaming that I'm drowning. How do we actually bypass that panic?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture of neuroplasticity, it requires dismantling how we fundamentally view confidence. We tend to mythologize confidence.
How do you mean?
We treat it like a genetic trait, as if some people are just born immune to fear. The material actually jokes about the absurdity of a baby coming out of the womb wearing sunglasses and holding a microphone, just inherently suave and self-assured.
That would be terrifying.
It would. But in reality, confidence is not a personality trait. It is a muscle.
Hmm.
Or, to use a neurological metaphor, it's like a hiking trail in your brain.
Okay, a hiking trail.
Yeah. Every time you shrink back and stay quiet, you are walking the avoidance trail. You walk it so often it becomes a paved superhighway. It becomes your default neurological route. To build confidence, you have to hack a brand new trail through the dense jungle of your discomfort. And you do that by putting in the reps.
Repetitions. So in the context of dismantling the fear of judgment, what exactly constitutes a rep?
A rep is any small, deliberate action that exposes you to mild social risk. This is the essence of exposure therapy. You do not start by giving a 40-minute keynote address to hostile shareholders.
Right, that would be way too much.
A rep could be leaving a thoughtful comment on a public article under your real name. It could be keeping your webcam on during a large Zoom call. It could be holding eye contact with a cashier and asking how their day is going. Every time you take an action that spikes your heart rate slightly, you are carving out that new neurological trail.
And the crucial part here is that the goal isn't to feel completely calm while doing it. The discomfort isn't a sign that you are doing it wrong. The discomfort is the actual weight you are lifting.
Exactly.
You have to lean into it. Instead of retreating when the cortisol spikes, you accept that your hands might shake a little and you do the rep anyway.
Yeah.
You prove to your brain that the anxiety is uncomfortable but not lethal.
Yes. You are teaching your nervous system to tolerate the sensation of being perceived.
Knowing we need to take reps and carve new neurological trails makes perfect sense. But in the heat of the moment, when the spotlight illusion kicks in and the brain wants to shut down, how do we actually force ourselves to take the rep?
This is where the material delivers its most profound psychological pivot. You have to actively convert your fear into curiosity.
Convert fear into curiosity. How does that work in practice?
Think about the internal monologue of fear. It asks catastrophic questions. What if I stumble over my words? What if they think my idea is naive? What if I am completely humiliated?
Yeah, the worst case scenarios.
Right. And those questions trigger the threat response. Curiosity, however, asks exploratory questions. I wonder how they will react if I suggest this. What might I learn from their feedback? Let's see what happens if I speak louder.
So what does this all mean for how we frame our lives? The suggestion here is to treat every social interaction like an experiment.
Yes, an experiment.
And the reason this scientist analogy is so incredibly powerful is because it completely detaches the ego from the outcome.
That is the brilliant part. A scientist running an experiment does not view an unexpected chemical reaction as a personal moral failure. They are simply gathering data. If you treat a conversation like an experiment, and you try a joke that completely fails to land, you don't spiral into shame. You aren't fundamentally flawed. You just collected valuable data. You learned that specific joke doesn't work with that specific audience. It removes the emotional weight of the interaction and replaces it with objective observation.
You are just logging the results. Fascinating. Bringing up the budget right now caused the room to tense up. Data logged. You remain a curious observer of your own life rather than a terrified victim of it.
But this raises an important question, though.
Yeah.
How do we actually cement this scientist mindset so it becomes our new default? Because the brain is stubborn.
It really is.
To ensure this perspective sticks, the material outlines a critical two-step debriefing exercise. Immediately after you take a rep, after you lean into the discomfort and run the experiment, you must stop and ask yourself two specific questions.
Question number 1, what surprised me? And question number 2, what went well?
And notice what is deliberately absent from that debrief.
Yeah.
You are not asking, what did I mess up? Or who looked at me funny?
Because asking those questions just sends you right back down the old superhighway of anxiety and self-monitoring.
Precisely. By forcing yourself to answer what surprised me and what went well, you're actively retraining your brain's reticular activating system. You're commanding your brain to scan the environment for evidence of growth and positive connection rather than evidence of threat.
That's amazing.
It surprised me. I guess my voice didn't shake as much as I thought it would. What went well? I actually made my point and a colleague nodded.
You are systematically starving the inner critic by refusing to give it data and feeding the new confident neural pathway instead. Over time, the validation you get from your own brave actions becomes significantly more rewarding than the perceived safety of shrinking back.
Yeah.
You literally rewire yourself to care more about the integrity of your experiment than the applause of the invisible crowd.
It is a profound shift from a defensive posture to an expansive one.
It really is. There is a tremendous amount of dense, actionable psychology to digest here, so let's quickly map the territory we've covered today. We started by exploring how early judgments linger and seep into our foundation, creating a heightened threat response to everyday social interactions.
Right.
We unpacked the heavy cognitive load of the spotlight illusion and how walking on eggshells forces us to step on our own hearts. We redefined criticism as a projection of the critic's own insecurity, something we can physically brush off.
Yes.
We dismantled the perfection trap, choosing instead to build our confidence muscle by taking messy, uncomfortable reps. And finally, we learned to detach our ego from the outcome by approaching life as a curious scientist, running experiments, and asking what went well.
When you string those frameworks together, it forms a comprehensive strategy for dismantling the architecture of social fear.
It absolutely does. Now, as we wrap up our time together, we always want to leave you with something provocative to mull over, something to challenge you as you move through your week.
We expend a massive amount of our limited cognitive energy playing defensive roles for an invisible audience. We shrink back, we curate our words, and we obsess over how this imaginary theater full of critics is judging our performance. But here is the ultimate truth. That audience is an absolute fiction.
Completely made up.
It is entirely a product of your own neurological wiring. You built the theater, you cast the critics, and you wrote their harsh scripts. Since you are the sole architect of this mental environment, what would happen if you actively fired your inner critics today?
Wow.
What if you consciously evicted them and populated those seats with a new imaginary audience, one that gives you a standing ovation strictly for attempting the experiment? One that cheers wildly for your messy, imperfect progress.
I love that. Imagine stepping into the pool, thrashing your arms around, swallowing water, looking completely uncoordinated, and having a stadium of people on the deck just losing their minds with pride just because you were brave enough to get wet.
Changing the audience changes the entire nature of the performance.
It changes everything. So the next time you find yourself standing in the shower delivering that flawless, passionate speech to the shampoo bottle, well, maybe don't keep it contained to the bathroom. Turn off the water, grab a towel, lean into the discomfort, and go run the experiment in the real world. The data you get back just might surprise you.